She attempted to undermine him on live television. His response changed everything. The email arrived late in the afternoon, a brief, formal message from the producers of The Morning Exchange, one of the most widely viewed talk shows in the country. They extended an invitation to Darius Bell, a tech entrepreneur and CEO of Innovis, to appear as a guest on their upcoming segment focused on diversity in the business world. Darius had seen this scenario before, a major media platform suddenly recognizing Black entrepreneurs, giving them a few moments in the spotlight for applause before shifting to the next trending topic. But this situation was different. Innovis was not just another startup. They had just secured a multi-million-dollar defense contract, surpassing some of the largest corporations in the industry. That was not luck. That was the result of 2 decades of unwavering dedication. Yet, he hesitated before confirming his participation. Something felt off. His assistant, Tasha, picked up on his reluctance. "Are you certain about this? You know how these shows operate. They adore a success story, but they enjoy dismantling one even more." Darius leaned back in his chair. "I can handle it. Besides, this is national exposure. Let's see what they have to say." Tasha exhaled, shaking her head. "Just do not let them trap you." He nodded, though deep inside, he understood the game. If this interview was an ambush, they had chosen the wrong opponent. The morning of the interview, Darius arrived at KXNT Studios in Los Angeles. The air in the green room was cool and sterile. A young producer greeted him, barely glancing up from her clipboard. "Mr. Bell, thank you for being here. We will mic you up in 5. No small talk. No warm-up. Just in and out, like a transaction." As he sat in the makeup chair, an assistant dusted powder on his face with detached efficiency. The monitor on the wall displayed the live broadcast, a celebrity scandal panel, followed by a cooking demonstration, then a transition card. Coming up next, the black tech boom. Is it talent or special treatment? Darius clenched his jaw. So, this was their angle. But if they believed they had the upper hand, they were in for a shock. What he did not realize, however, was just how far they were willing to go. The set of The Morning Exchange was crafted to appear welcoming. Soft blues and golds, a glass coffee table separating the host's chair from the guests. Cameras hovered like silent observers, capturing every movement, every reaction. Darius adjusted his suit jacket as he took his seat across from Madeline Royce, the program's lead anchor, a seasoned journalist known for her probing questions. She smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. "Darius Bell," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. "CEO of Innovis. A true American success story." Darius gave a polite nod. "I appreciate the invitation." She leaned in slightly, flipping through her cue cards. "Let's get right into it. Your company recently secured a $200 million government contract, outbidding some of the most prominent names in tech. That is quite the achievement." Darius recognized this strategy. Build him up first, create the illusion of admiration, before revealing the real agenda. He responded calmly. "It was a long process, but yes, we put in the effort. We developed a security encryption system that outperformed our competitors. It is as simple as that." Madeline crossed her legs. "Some have called it groundbreaking." A deliberate pause. "But others have raised concerns." Darius remained composed. "Concerns?" She picked up a card and read aloud. "Certain industry experts suggest that Innovis may have benefited from federal diversity incentives. Some argue that companies like yours have an advantage in securing these contracts because agencies are focused on diversifying their vendors. That perhaps this was not just about merit, but about fulfilling a quota." There it was, the real reason for his presence. Darius allowed a moment of silence before responding. "I have heard that argument before. It is interesting, though. When a Black entrepreneur succeeds, it is special treatment. But when a legacy firm, operated by the same families for generations, wins the same contracts, no one questions it." The energy in the studio shifted. The producers off-camera exchanged glances. Madeline remained firm. "So, you were saying race played no role in your success?" Darius chuckled, shaking his head. "Let me ask you this. When SpaceX secured NASA contracts, was it because Elon Musk met a diversity quota? When Jeff Bezos landed government deals for Blue Origin, was it due to his background? Or do we only pose that question when the CEO looks like me? Madeline's expression barely changed. So, you do not believe these diversity programs are necessary? Darius clasped his hands together. They help level the playing field. But people often forget. The playing field was never level to begin with. But Madeline was not finished. She had another card to play. Her smile sharpened, subtle yet calculated. She glanced at her cue cards, then back up at him. Well, Darius, let's discuss that playing field you mentioned, she said, her tone cooling slightly. You grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Single mother. Public school. You climbed your way up from nothing. That is an inspiring journey. Darius nodded slowly, sensing where this was leading. She continued, but some might wonder. How does someone without an Ivy League education, without deep-rooted family connections, go from a struggling neighborhood to securing contracts that billion-dollar corporations fail to obtain? She let the question hang, its implication unmistakable. How did you get here? Did someone pull strings? Darius tilted his head slightly, choosing his words with care. It is called work, Madeline. Some of us do not have generational wealth or country club networks to lean on. So we build from the ground up. Madeline gave a small nod, as though acknowledging his words. But she was not truly listening. Surely, you had assistance along the way, she pressed. A mentor, a program, something that gave you a head start? Darius exhaled quietly. Assistance came in the form of working 3 jobs while earning my engineering degree. Assistance meant sleeping in my office while developing my first software prototype because I could not afford rent. That is the assistance I received. Her lips pressed together briefly. Behind the cameras, the producers were riveted. Madeline sifted through her cue cards once more. Yet some argue that Black entrepreneurs today have more opportunities than ever before. Affirmative action, minority business grants, government incentives, all created to open doors that were once closed. Darius leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You know what is fascinating? When a Black business owner succeeds, people always ask what programs helped us. Yet, no one inquires about which old money bank financed a white-owned startup. No one questions which family connections secured their admission into Stanford, or which golf buddy invested in their venture. He let that settle before continuing. Success is not awarded like a lottery prize. People like me had to be twice as capable just to claim a seat at the table. A shift in the atmosphere. The unspoken realization that something genuine was unfolding. Madeline, however, remained poised. That is an interesting perspective, she said, her voice smooth as glass. But let us consider another factor, perception. She turned slightly toward the cameras. Darius, you present yourself as a self-made success. But some argue that Black entrepreneurs receive disproportionate media attention, that the narrative of overcoming hardship is more marketable than the thousands of white business owners who work just as hard yet remain unnoticed. Darius let out a quiet laugh. Oh, so now we receive too much attention? The silence in the room was louder than any of her previous questions, but Madeline was not finished, not yet. She had one last card to play, the one designed to break him. She took a slow breath, shifting in her seat just enough to make it appear casual, but Darius caught it, a crack in the facade. She glanced at her cue cards once more, then set them down. This next part, she wanted to deliver directly. Darius, she said, tilting her head slightly, I think it is fair to say you are passionate about this, and I respect that. But let me ask you something. Darius gave a slight nod, waiting. Do you think some of this outrage is exaggerated? She asked, pausing to let her words settle. After all, your success story proves that the system is not as stacked against Black entrepreneurs as some claim. The audacity. Darius could feel the heat creeping up his spine, but he did not let it show. Instead, he let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. You know, he said, his voice measured. It is interesting how people love to use one success story as proof that a problem does not exist. Madeline's smile remained intact, but something in her eyes flickered. Darius leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. Let me put it this way. If one person climbs out of a burning building, do you point at them and say, see? The fire was not that bad? Madeline opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it. Darius was not done. The fact that I made it does not mean the system is not broken. It just means I had to fight twice as hard to get through it. He let his words linger. Even the studio crew had stopped moving. Madeline adjusted in her seat, reaching for a controlled response. I understand your perspective, but let us talk about another side of this. She turned slightly toward the cameras, her voice adopting that carefully neutral tone used for damage control. Some might say your frustration is not really about race, she continued, that it is about resentment toward larger corporations. After all, you have publicly criticized big tech companies for not hiring more diverse executives. Darius tilted his head. Resentment? No. Accountability? Absolutely. Madeline pressed her lips together for a beat. Then what do you say to those who believe that, in today's economy, success is based on hard work, not race? Darius exhaled through his nose, then locked eyes with her. This was it. I say, he began, that people love to believe in fairy tales when they are the ones benefiting from them. A ripple of silence washed over the set, the kind of silence that sticks. But let's be real, he continued, his voice steady. Black entrepreneurs still get denied loans at twice the rate of white business owners. We still receive less than 2% of venture capital funding. And even when we prove ourselves, we still get asked whether we deserved our success. Madeline sat still, listening but not necessarily hearing. So let's stop pretending the system is not rigged, Darius said, his voice calm but firm. It is, and the only people who do not see it are the ones it works for. Silence. Pure, heavy silence. The producers did not cut to commercial. The control room did not intervene. This was raw. Madeline shifted slightly, finally looking uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to speak, but Darius was not finished. This was the moment that would send shockwaves across the country. Madeline cleared her throat, glancing briefly at the off-camera producers, but there was no rescue coming. She had walked into this, and now she had to sit in it. Darius adjusted his watch, letting the silence linger just long enough to make people squirm. Then he leaned back in his chair, exhaling. You know what the real problem is? He said, his voice quieter now but somehow heavier. Madeline hesitated. What? Darius did not blink. The bar is not in the same place for everyone. She shifted slightly. Meaning? Darius said, a mediocre white man can fail upwards in this country, but a brilliant black man has to jump through flaming hoops just to get a shot. A producer off-camera cursed under their breath. They knew this was going viral. Darius continued. A white CEO can run a company into the ground, bankrupt it, lay off thousands of employees, and somehow get hired somewhere else. Meanwhile, a black CEO has one bad quarter, and suddenly it is proof that we were not ready for leadership. Madeline opened her mouth to respond, but he was not done. And the best part? Darius chuckled dryly. When we actually make it, people like you sit across from us and ask if we got here because of some special advantage. Silence. Madeline's jaw tightened. It was subtle, but the camera caught it. Darius leaned forward just slightly, not aggressive, just firm, just final. You wanted to talk about fairness? He let out a soft, bitter chuckle. Then let's start by telling the truth. Another silence, but this one was different. It was not discomfort anymore. It was impact. Madeline's expression had shifted. It was not just the audience watching Darius now. It was the entire country. And then, the moment. Darius turned slightly, looking straight into the camera. I know what some of you are thinking right now, he said. Some of you are nodding because you have seen this, lived this. He held his gaze. And some of you are sitting there frowning, arms crossed, telling yourself this is not real, that I am just playing victim, that it is all in my head. His lips pressed together for a second before he finished. But deep down, you know I am right. The studio was silent. No one breathed. And then, all right, we need to take a quick break. The producer's voice crackled over the speakers. Madeline forced a polite smile. The cameras cut, but the damage had already been done. Within an hour, clips of the exchange were everywhere, but the real storm was only beginning. The clip hit social media like a wrecking ball. By the time Darius was in his car, his phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts, missed calls, notifications flooding his screen. Twitter was on fire. Darius Bell just exposed the media's bias on live TV. This was powerful. Hashtag truth hurts. The way he looked into the camera and called out America. Chills. And Darius Bell was right. But not everyone saw it that way. Here we go again. Another successful guy pretending to be oppressed. Cry me a river. Stop the victim mindset. Wow. This guy just proved why people don't like hiring activists. Play the race card all you want, but hard work speaks louder. Merit matters. Cable news picked it up within the hour. Some called him brave. Others called him angry and combative. By lunchtime, the Morning Exchange released a carefully worded statement. We value open dialogue and diverse perspectives. While today's discussion became more intense than expected, we stand by our commitment to fair conversations. Darius laughed when he read it. Fair, right? His assistant, Tasha, called him, her voice half laughing, half exasperated. Do you realize you just set the internet on fire? Darius rubbed his temple. Wasn't exactly my plan. Well, congrats. You just became the most talked about entrepreneur in America. He did not respond. He knew what came next. Viral moments never stayed just moments. They became battlegrounds. And the next 48 hours were about to get messy. But this was no longer just about him. By the next morning, the story had exploded beyond social media. Cable news anchors debated it on live television. Opinion pieces flooded every major publication. Everyone had an angle. Fox News. Is Darius Bell the new face of corporate entitlement? CNN. Darius Bell's viral moment. A reckoning for America's meritocracy. Business Insider. What Darius Bell's interview reveals about race and success in America. Meanwhile, Madeleine Royce was in full damage control mode. On her show the next morning, she gave a carefully rehearsed response. I respect Mr. Bell and his accomplishments, but I stand by my questions. My job as a journalist is to ask what the audience is thinking. If my questions were uncomfortable, that only proves how necessary they were. Translation. She was not backing down. Darius watched from his office, shaking his head. Tasha sat across from him, scrolling through emails. You know, she said, we just got a flood of new investor inquiries. People want to work with us. Darius smirked. Let me guess, the same people who ignored us last year? Tasha shrugged. Guess being controversial is good for business, but it was not all positive. Some clients pulled out. A major corporate partner suddenly decided to reevaluate their commitments. And then came the death threats, emails, phone calls, even an unmarked package left outside Innova's headquarters. Nothing inside but a single sheet of paper with one word written in bold. Enough. Tasha frowned as she read the message. You need security. Darius let out a slow breath, rubbing his temples. He knew this would come. Anytime a black man spoke too boldly, too unapologetically, this was the cost. But backing down was never an option. And now, he had a decision to make. Would he let the backlash silence him? Or was this just the beginning of something bigger? Darius sat in his office, staring at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind. Praise, backlash, threats, opportunities. He thought about his younger self, the kid from Birmingham who had to fight for every inch of success, the one who watched doors shut in his face while others walked through without knocking. And now, here he was, at the center of a national debate he never asked for, but one he could not ignore. Tasha entered, her expression unreadable. We just got an offer. Darius raised an eyebrow. From who? She set a folder on his desk. A network. They want you to do a televised special. A one-on-one deep dive about race, business, and the system. Darius exhaled. So now they want to listen? Tasha smirked. Seems like it. Then, after a beat, what do you want to do? He leaned back in his chair, thinking. He could walk away, let the noise die down, get back to business. Or he could use this moment, not for clout, not for attention, but to say the things nobody wanted to hear. Darius picked up the folder, flipping through the proposal. Then he set it down and looked at Tasha. Tell them I'll do it. Her eyes widened slightly. You sure? He nodded. Yeah, but on my terms. Because if the system was going to put him under a spotlight, he was damn sure going to control the narrative. Darius Bell's viral moment was not just another internet controversy. It was a reckoning. It forced a conversation people had been dodging for decades. About race, about success, about who gets to rise without question and who gets questioned when they rise. Some called him an activist. Some called him arrogant. Some called him right. But one thing was certain. Nobody could ignore him anymore. So what do you think? Does success mean playing by the rules of a broken system? Or does it mean rewriting the rules entirely? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe more stories like this need to be told, subscribe.